Hi, welcome to geometry. I miss you guys. Hopefully you guys are working on this. Sorry, I'm moving the camera around a lot. I wanted to tell you that, guys, I'm an aunt, so hopefully I can put the picture up if I know how to work all this stuff up. If you have any questions though regarding math, go ahead and go on the link down here and go to my email me up, hit me up with any questions that you have pertaining to math only. Again, this classroom is very empty. It feels different without you guys, but make sure you have your worksheet out. It is lesson 63. That's what we're gonna do today. That is worksheet reteaching 63. So it says Tuesday. Here it says geometry. All of that there. You should be getting quizzes every day. I believe on Wednesday there wasn't a quiz. But every day after that there should be a quiz. If there's any questions that's not working, make sure you do contact me, because all those grades, all those quizzes are for your grade. I don't know how long we'll be here, but make sure that you're always doing it. Again, questions, go ahead and email me. Let's go ahead and start talking about vectors. Vectors are different. They're kind of like rays, but not really. They're different. So here there's different ways of naming rays or naming the vectors. So they have a weird symbol. It's kind of like a halfway arrow, but it's not a complete arrow. So you name it vector V. They usually have their names on it, like on the side, but sometimes you name it with just the vector that it has, the symbol, or is vector T with terminal point A. You'll see that in example 1. Sometimes they have the ending point is where the arrow is. Like this one will be the Q, but your terminal point is like the ending point, not where it starts. Low dot is where it starts. It's actually where that arrow keeps on going and never ending. So like, vector T with terminal point A, that's example 1. So that's for naming it. For finding vectors, these are finding the distance. They'll tell you find the distance of this vector and that vector. To do that, you have to find the two coordinates. So we're using the distance formula again. So again, make sure you always have this. You should be able to do this by now. You should be pros. We've done it so many times. But here, you need two coordinates. So here they have an example 2. They have some type of coordinate grid, but there's no black line there, so it doesn't show you where the origin is. So here in this case, we have to find two coordinates. Here we have to assume it's 0, 0. Even though there's no coordinate there, we just assume it's 0, 0. Everything else should have their own coordinates with a black line to show you what's the first quadrant, second quadrant, etc., etc. But in this case, there's no quadrants. So we have to assume this is our starting point. We're gonna label this 0, 0. That's my first point. My second point, I go 2 units to the right. I go 4 units up. 1, 2, 3, 4. So my coordinate for that is 2, 4. So I have those two coordinates. I use the distance formula. So I go step by step, make sure I fill it in correctly. Label it if you need to. 2 squared plus 4 squared. You get square root of 20. Simplify that, because the square root of 20 is find factors of 20, one of them being a perfect square. That's 4 and 5. 4 square root of 4 is 2. So your distance for your vector for V is 2 radical 5. Next one is we have something that's slightly different. It's not coordinates anymore. It's a component form of a vector. So that means it's different. And whenever I go like this, that means people are emailing me. They have questions. So again, feel free to ask me questions. I always do that though. It's not just because I'm hitting a bug. Here, it's how many we have vectors. So they're components of vectors, meaning how many units it shifts left or right or up and down. So how many units it shifts horizontally and vertically. So here, it's like coordinates, but they're slightly different. It's not exactly where it is. Here it's say how many units it moved left or right. And then comma, how many units it moved up or down, just like X and Y. But here, for V, the vector V, we have 2, 5. Not because it's a coordinate 2, 5, but here, the starting point, from this point to this line, I have to move 2 units to the right, and then I move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units up. So 2 is how many you're moving left or right. 5 is how many you're moving up or down. Sometimes you have opposite vectors. That means they're facing the opposite direction. So just like our lines, when it's a positive slope, it's facing upward. When it's a negative slope, it's facing downward. Same thing with vectors. So here we have a vector. Now the arrow is facing downwards. So that means it's an opposite vector. So that means you have your symbols the same, but keep in mind your signs are going to be different. So our starting point's here. Again, we moved 2 units, but now it's going to be -2. and then we move 1, 2, and how many units we move vertically is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So here, these are called opposite vectors, but if you see there's an arrow in the opposite direction, so therefore it's opposite with negative numbers. Now, last part is adding or subtracting vectors. That's a back part of your page. The front part is finding your distance. The back part is adding or subtracting vectors. Again, you have to keep in mind you're finding your vectors of each one, so how many units you move left or right, up or down, and then you add each of the x's in there. So again, it's not parentheses. They're little slanted lines here. So to find the vector of r, so we have to see how many units we move left or right. In this case, we don't move any units left or right. If you see, it's a perfect line straight down, so I have 0. Now for moving vertically, so that means up or down, I am moving 1, 2, 3, 4 units down. And that 4 units, since I'm moving down, it's negative. Now let's look at t. So remember, you're not naming it by your r. It'll be vector t with a terminal point, and this one doesn't have it, or I didn't write it down. Yeah, I didn't write it down. So this is the vector here. We have to find the compound format of that. So now we see how many units it moves left or right, 0. We see how many units it moves vertically, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's facing downward, so it's a negative 6. So look at it if it's going upward or downward. The last step is very easy. You're adding and subtracting vectors. So when you add or subtract vectors, you add all your x's. 0 plus 0, that is 0. Then you add your y's, negative 4 plus negative 6, negative 10. So when you add it together, you're combining the two vectors, you end up with 0, negative 10. Again, they're not parentheses, they are the components form, not compound, components form. If you have any questions, make sure to email me down there. These two are the most important parts for your worksheet to answer them. You can look for more examples in the book. You can look at the lesson practice, but just make sure you're doing the worksheet. Love you guys. See you later.